About a week ago, I asked the good folks of TikTok to give me their horror hot takes. I promised to make a video about this, so I'm going to anyways, but I'm going to do a little bit of a fun spin on it. This is basically hot take court. I'm going to read your hot take out here out loud, kind of talk about it, and if I agree with it, you get a pass, but if I disagree with it, I serve you a sentence of my choosing, and it can be something super light or the worst thing that you've ever heard of. So let's go ahead and get started here. All right, here's a good one. I'm sick of artsy horror films and just want the non-pretentious stuff back. I think this person is a little bit misguided. I kind of get what they're saying, and I partially blame like the crowd who loves these type of pretentious elevated horror, as they're called, and I feel like that's part of the issue. Horror is a massive umbrella. There is no such thing as elevated horror. That's kind of like separating yourself from the genre that you claim to love in a way that makes you sound extremely elitist. So you have movies like Hereditary, Midsommar, The Witch, and things like The Lighthouse, where people act as if it transcends the genre of horror. That's why they call it elevated horror. And I feel like that's extremely misguided and kind of really pretentious. It's like saying, I don't drive a car, I drive a hybrid. It comes across like you're better than everybody, and I personally hate that label. So while I do think this is a bit misguided, it's not necessarily a hot take because I do know a lot of people who think this way. They want the classic slashers back of the 80s, but those really never went away. They're still making Scream movies, they're still making, turn your brain off horror films all the time. You look anywhere on any streaming service and you'll find some movies that you will probably like that were released in the year that you're looking for them. 2025 was filled with non-elevated horror type movies, and they're all pretty good. So I'm a little lukewarm on this take. I don't think it's necessarily a hot take, but I also don't think it's like one of the most common things I've ever heard. So you know what? You get a pass. I'll let you pass this time. Oh brother, here we go. Jump scares are stupid and boring. You're not really scaring me, you're making me react quickly to an unnecessary stimuli. I want the tension of realizing and understanding something terrifying. This is not a hot take at all. If you ask any horror fan what their least favorite thing about horror movies is, they're gonna say jump scares. Everybody hates jump scares, and I honestly understand why, because like this person said, you are just reacting to unnecessary stimuli. When a horror movie does it poorly, it's just bad. It's embarrassing when a jump scare just doesn't affect you at all, and it just makes the whole genre look bad. Someone can very easily paint with a broad brush of the horror genre and just say, well, it's all just shitty jump scares anyway. So I totally understand this mindset. This is not a hot take at all. And I find that people who say this mostly just watch really bad jump scares. These things can work in a vacuum. There's a few examples of some of the best jump scares you'll ever see in your entire life. Exorcist 3 and The Haunting of Hill House come immediately to mind when I think of extremely effective jump scares that take the time to build everything up and pay off in an extremely satisfying way. So I do agree with this, but this is not a hot take at all. So your punishment is when you leave your clothes in the dryer overnight, when you wake up the next morning, they're still going to be a little bit damp and you're just running late for work. So you don't necessarily have the time to do another cycle and you have to wear slightly damp clothes to work. That's your punishment for this take. People love to shit on movies that are heavy on gore, Terrifier, cough cough, completely disregarding the work that makeup artists put in to make that stuff look realistic. I saw Terrifier 3 in theaters and wasn't even scared because I was just in awe of all the work on that screen. Honestly, this is a pretty hot take, I will say, and I really like this opinion as well. A lot of people love to disregard movies like Saw or Terrifier as torture porn, gore fests, and don't look at anything past that. I do think that it takes a unique eye to really appreciate everything that you're seeing on the screen, because these are extremely well executed events that take a lot of work. If you look at any behind the scenes clips of Terrifier 2 or 3, you can see that there is a shitload of work that goes into making these things. And it's genuinely really cool to see it all executed. People might get upset at the level of gore and they can't disconnect, that what you're seeing isn't actually happening on screen. But I do agree with this take. I do think that people people just completely disregard these films as nothing trash while not appreciating the work that goes into them. You can dislike these movies all you want, but to call them like soulless or that, you know, nothing but torture porn, I feel like is a little bit dismissive of the movies and of the passionate people that put a lot of work into them. So I honestly do think this is a hot take, and you get a pass. Horror movies aren't supposed to be scary to be good. Most horror movies aren't scary to me, yet I'm a huge horror fan. It wasn't scary, grow up. Okay, I love that final part there, grow up. And I agree with this. I do honestly think this is a little bit of a hot take, because I find that a very common criticism for why people hated a horror movie was they didn't find it scary. And you can dislike a horror movie, but I just don't feel like that is a substantive enough criticism of not finding it scary. Like, I'll say, for example, I really enjoyed It Chapter 1, speaking of Pennywise, but I didn't necessarily find it all that scary. A lot of the jump scares and the payoff didn't really work for me, but I love the character dynamic with the Losers Club, and Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise, as we said before, is just completely iconic. I don't find most slasher films to be scary, yet one of my favorite horror franchises is Scream and Friday the 13th. But I don't find those remotely scary. There's a lot to appreciate about a horror film outside of how much it scares you. And I feel like part of enjoying the genre is finding those kind of little things to like about the movie. But when you ask a lot of people what they felt about a horror movie, if they say they hate it, one of the first things they'll leap to is the fact that it wasn't scary. So I do agree with this take. I do think it's a hot take, just given a lot of conversations about horror movies, but I'm willing to hear other people's opinions because I do personally feel like this is a hot take. So you get a pass. Sinners is garbage and we use jump scares now. Listen, you can't just say the movie is garbage without any kind of valid reasons for it. I will say this is a hot take, but I also think it's a garbage take because, like, objectively speaking, it's just not. Like, it's an extremely well-made movie that's edited extremely well. If you personally didn't like it, I think that's a different thing, but you need just more substantive reasons than it was just garbage. And if you're saying that Sinners overuses jump scares, I also disagree with that, unless it's a separate take. I do agree with the fact that we overuse jump scares now. That isn't a hot take at all. And I also disagree with the fact that Sinners is garbage, because even though I didn't really like the third act of that film all that much, I still think it's an extremely well-made movie. So this is just kind of a bad take. It's not even, it is a hot one, but it's just bad and uninformed more than anything. So your punishment is having to watch Sinners every single day for the next week over and over and over again until you can come up with a good reason as to why you didn't like it. And even then, your further punishment is to watch Sinners over and over and over again, but specifically the part where they talk about wet pussies. Jump scares have a place in horror. I'm gonna say this is a lukewarm take because a lot of people vehemently hate jump scares, but there are a pretty significant number of people who like jump scares and do feel like they have a good place in horror. I am one of those people. So I'm gonna say this is a lukewarm take that I agree with. Good jump scares absolutely have their place in the horror genre. Like I said earlier, when they're crafted really well, they can really punctuate a movie. They can make it so memorable if they just nail it, if they get you every time. It is overused. I do agree with that as well. A lot of really shitty horror directors who have no idea what they're doing will just completely overuse them and make people just numb to it. So I do think this is kind of a lukewarm take. You get a pass. It's not a bad take. So enjoy your freedom. iPad kids will never understand the fear of being alone in the dark, which is why a lot of them don't like Skinamarink. Okay, well, this is a hilarious take. I don't honestly know how to feel about this one. I don't know if it's a hot take or not, because I have met people who are much older than traditional iPad kids who don't like these kind of slow burn movies, and it has nothing to do with them being alone in the dark or having a poor attention span. It just has to do with the fact that it just didn't resonate with them for some reason. I wouldn't necessarily pin the death of slow burn movies on iPad kids or the TikTok attention span, because I genuinely just feel like it's always been this way. People get bored. It just is just human nature. But I do find an inordinate amount of people who spend a lot of time on social media and TikTok commenting on these things, and their only criticism was that it was boring, which in my opinion is just not a good enough criticism of a movie. I don't really know how I feel about this take. I don't think it's a hot take, but I don't necessarily think it's a cold take either. It's kind of like a weird boomer take, if I'm honest with you. But this is very funny. You made me laugh, so you'll get a pass for this one. The whole movies in Sinister made me shit myself in the theater. Not a hot take, just really funny. It's not even a take, honestly. It's just a really funny anecdote. So you get a pass. They're all just cash grabs with terrible writing and not ever entertaining or scary. You are watching the complete wrong horror movies. This isn't a hot take. This is just dog shit. This is a terrible take. Your punishment for this is diarrhea for a month. The famous jump scare in Insidious isn't even a jump scare. Jump scares are supposed to come out of nowhere. This is a hot take because the jump scare in Insidious is pretty beloved. You said it yourself that it's famous for how well crafted it is. So your first part is a hot take where it isn't even a jump scare, because it is, by like definition, it is. Something just kind of appearing, even if it's telegraphed, is still a jump scare.
It said Dalton. I can still hear that voice.
Because you're anticipating something. It's setting it up is what it's doing. It's still appearing out of nowhere, but it's just doing a better job of setting it up. And that's kind of my thing with jump scare haters, right? It's like, which is it? Do you want it to be set up properly and built up, or do you want it to just come out of nowhere and leave you numb to it? Because I feel like when things aren't properly built towards, you get these annoying jump scares that don't affect you all that much or just make you react to a stimuli. However, when you have a well-crafted one, like the one in Insidious that he's referring to here, you get the proper build-up, you're anticipating something, and then when it happens, it's like a payoff to that. If it didn't affect you, that's totally fine. But to add this weird definition that jump scares are supposed to come out of nowhere is very strange to me. So this is a hot take. You get a pass. I just disagree with it. Black people have the best survival instincts IRL, but always die first in horror movies. You know what? I'm going to say that this is a cold take because I've heard this trope before. I've heard of this idea. People always joke about it. It's always mentioned in movies as well, that the black guy always dies first in horror movies. But I gotta be completely honest and say that I don't see it all that often. Maybe I'm missing out on the movies specifically, but I watch hundreds of horror movies every single year. And yes, it does happen, but I can't say that it's consistent enough for it to be like a noticeable trope. It does happen, but I find that people often overblow how often it does happen within the horror genre. And while there are notable examples, like Jurassic Park is a big one, I can't say that this is consistent enough for me to be a noticeable trope. If anything, it should be the blonde girl dies first, but I don't understand where this comes from, and I would love to be kind of informed on where this trope originated, or if somebody has a list of all the times where this has happened. I would love to see it, because it's not something entirely out of the realm of possibility for me, but it's also not something I see often enough to agree with. So speaking from personal experience, from what I've seen, this is a cold take, and it is my court, so you will be punished. And your punishment is to archive every single instance where a black guy dies in a film, not a horror film, in a film, since the beginning of time, and send me that list by tomorrow. So go ahead and get on that, or worse consequences will happen. Thank you. Hereditary was okay. This is not a hot take. A lot of people feel this way. I've met a lot of people who don't like this movie or hate it or think it's overrated. I think it's one of the most popular things on the horror subreddit to be like, hot take, but Hereditary wasn't as good as other people says it was. This is not a hot take at all, so you must be punished. Your punishment is Toni Collette banging her head on your bedroom door when you're trying to sleep every single night for the next 2 months. And the last take that we're going to talk about today is 99% of horror is lame and unoriginal. I love the genre, but hate almost every horror movie. Now, this is a pretty hot take for me, but it's also a slightly misguided one. Personally, I'm like, how can you claim that you love the genre, but you hate almost every horror movie you've ever seen? Like, that part just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. But I also disagree with the idea that it's unoriginal, because it really isn't, if you think about it. A lot of horror movies, they do take inspiration from things like mythology or Bible stories or anything like that, but I wouldn't necessarily claim that it's unoriginal. When you watch any kind of genre, it's gonna have its fair share of amazing genre-defining films, but it's also gonna have 10 times as much trash. For every Godfather, there is Gotti. It just is what it is when you're approaching the genre. For horror films, I find that it is a little bit more outnumbered because of how easy it is to make a horror film. You can just take some friends, go to the woods, and make a found footage film. You can just do that. There is an insane amount of trash out there, and while I love watching it, I wouldn't necessarily paint the horror genre with such a broad stroke like that. The way that this person here goes on to defend themselves in the comments, and I want to give them a chance to kind of like redeem themselves a little bit, because I do think this is a hot take, but I also disagree with it pretty vehemently here. So this person later clarified and said, maybe 99% wasn't right. 95. I've seen some amazing horror movies, but most are boring to me. I don't know. It's always spooky ghost / demon or serial killer with a costume perfect for merchandising. So this is another thing for me, is that like, he's probably just watching a lot of commercially big horror movies and not resonating with them, which is fine. Obviously, I'm not that big on like the big slasher films like Terrifier. I'm not a big fan of the Blumhouse films either. Like, you have to kind of find your niche. If you say that you love horror, but you hate almost every movie you're watching, you might just not be finding your exact niche or place that you love. Like, I personally love psychological horror, stuff that deals with the things from within, things in your body. I love body horror. I love kind of things that touch upon like apocalypses or omnicide or what it means to be human. I love horror films that come from within. So naturally, I'm not going to enjoy a movie like Terrifier because it's by the numbers, a slasher film, a very well made one, and I can appreciate the incredible effects behind it, but it's not really going to resonate with me as much as something like Annihilation would. But it's not going to resonate with me as much as something like Annihilation would. So I do feel like if you love the horror genre but you're hating everything you watch, maybe try branching out. Maybe just look elsewhere. On Hulu, just experiment with things. If maybe you're into like existential horror, watch I Saw the TV Glow or something. Like, just explore out there, branch out, because not everything is spooky clown or spooky ghost, and maybe it's just what you're watching, is what I would say. So I'll give you a pass because this is a hot take, but I do disagree with it. But what I will say is watch more horror, branch out. Just explore different subgenres and see how that makes you feel. And that will do it for this video. This is a pretty long one. Had a lot of great responses on this TikTok here. I really enjoyed doing it, actually. I read all the comments and I loved how people got into it. Pretty respectful, I will say. A lot of really healthy discussion on there too. I do have a TikTok over at Real Renegades. I will post it in the description. If you like this video, please feel free to subscribe, share it with your friends, get the word out there. And if you have a horror hot take, go ahead and post it in the YouTube comment. But I swear to God, if your horror hot take is, I hate jump scares or I hate Terrifiers, I am going to come to your house and I'm going to cut your fucking nose off.